Well, I was too young. I was born in Long Beach, California, old Seaside Hospital, on the 31st of July, 1923. My father was just out of college, and he worked for Standard Oil of California. And in I don't think 29, I think much before that, about 25, he was left college and was hired by Standard Oil of California in El Segundo. And they went belly up, I guess, in the 29 crash. And he saw it coming, so he went in business for himself with a Richfield Oil Company service station on 20th and Pacific. And then we lived right directly behind the service station. So I grew up there more or less, and we had a very large backyard and very few people in the area. So we would, as young'uns, we would shinny up the poles, the light poles of the service station. They were in bell shape, and we'd turn them onto the backyard. And we'd play badminton and checkers and all kinds of things in the backyard. So we had quite a corner there that there's always a party going on somewhere. My mother was a housewife. She belonged to quite a few clubs and so forth in the area, and Ebell and some of those clubs. And she was kind of a socialite, more or less. I remember that our grandmother, or her mother, my grandmother lived with us most of my life that I can remember. And of course, Grandma did the cooking and so forth and so on. So she more or less raised me rather than my mother. My dad was always busy in the business. Brothers, they're normal, I guess. My youngest brother was always the goat of everything. If we'd make a wagon car and then push it, so my little brother was always the driver, the one that crashed, and so forth. And there was, I really don't know now. I think there was about 5 years difference in myself and my next in line. And so we were never that close. But I do remember that he was very active in ROTC. Left high school, went to work. My father became very ill. And so I went to work to support the family, you might say. I went to work for W.P. Fuller and Company. It was a paint um, company, and at that time in 40, the war had just begun, or just before the war began. And in 41, of course, then came all the shipyards in California, Cal Ship and Consolidated, quite a few in Terminal Island. And I used to take loads of paint and white lead, red lead, things like that to the islands. We spent a lot of time at the beach, and they had an area there along the beach line they called the Pike, and it was very interesting. Yeah, we made our own surfboards out of balsa logs that we would get thrown in the trash in Terminal Island. And we'd go out there with our bicycles and get these logs, more or less. They were what they called logs then. And we would carve a surfboard out of them. I could never keep them balanced on the surfer. My kids were, but not me. It was a Model A Ford, or Model T Ford, that was made by the Shriners. And that got us in a lot of trouble. It was weighted in the back. So if you had two men in the front, three in the back, one in the front would jump into the back, the weight would tilt the front up, and we'd hit it towards crowds and think this way, and then it'd do this and everybody would scream and get out of the way. And they got us in more trouble than anything. I had a best friend, yes, he was an only child. I don't know whether that makes any difference or not, but he joined the Coast Guard, and he became an admiral in the Coast Guard. His name was Eugene McCrory. And I used to follow his service time that way, because he was a very smart lad. I was drafted. I caught the second draft. And went in the last of January, 1942. And I was in the service January 1943. And I went to basic training. It was a real education for me. Living in California, you're living with Hispanic and black and so forth, going to school with them. You don't think anything of it, but they sent me to Keesler Field, Mississippi. And did I get an education on how the Deep South worked? And at that time, it was black and white. You know, black drinking fountains and white drinking fountains and restrooms and everything like that. And we got ourselves in trouble several times I remember boarding a bus to go downtown Biloxi. And there was a black lady waiting for the bus too. And we insisted, stupidly, that she get on the bus before us, because that's what we were taught, more or less. And the bus driver just turned around and hit her with his foot, pushed her off the bus again. Well, of course, that was fighting words for us. Well, we picked him up and threw him out on the pavement. The police were called, and we had a big fuss, and we were told at that time that that's not the way we do things here. But it was quite an education we had. Oh, boot camp was very, well, mostly marching. We marched and marched and marched, and had a sergeant that was very Southern, and a very ringing voice. You could hear him for a whole acre. But it was good. There was no... We learned a lot of fancy moves and things from him. But from there, we signed up to go to different trade schools. And first we went to armament school. They taught us all about machine guns, small cannons, bombs, of course, and all the paraphernalia that went with them. And I was labeled, I got labeled an armorer out of there, and was sent to Kingman, Arizona for gunnery school. And we went through gunnery school in AT-6s, up with a 30 caliber in the back of them. And we would take our ammunition coil and dip it in paint, different colored paint, and you use that through the weapon. There was paint all over everything. But when the bullet would go through the canopy or the towing target or thing like this, it would leave color. And then they'd come down and they'd count the different colors, the number of the different colors that went into the target, how many times you hit the target. And we'd be graded on that. And the same way with turrets. In a hydraulic turret, we'd shoot at passing targets and things. And well, they were graded on the color. So we passed that. They called it Bugs Bunny, I think. At that time, the unit was called Bugs Bunny. And we all came out sergeants, buck sergeants. And then we were sent to Walla Walla, Washington, put on an airplane, or given a pilot. And then we flew all over the country, more or less, to train the navigator, and bomb runs to train the bombardier, and to really get to know each other as a crew. What we were supposed to do in combat And then we were given our own plane, and we flew to Nova Scotia, then to Labrador, then across Greenland to Iceland. And we landed in Iceland, 106 mile an hour gale going on, sleet and so forth. We just didn't get down there and stayed in Iceland for a week until the weather cleared, and then flew to Prestwick, Scotland, and stayed in Prestwick, Scotland for about a week or so. And it's where we went on pass, and we started walking to see the countryside and everything, and we found ourselves in Ireland. And we were told to get out of Ireland as quick as we could. So we went back into Scotland, and then we were sent to Diss, D-I-S-S, Thorpe Abbott and Diss in England, which is right in the central part of England, between Norwich and Ipswich, if you're familiar with the coast, and to bomb group, the 100th bomb group. They called it the Bloody 100th. And because their losses were over 60%. And his replacement crew. And there we started. We hit there the 28th of January and did our first mission the 28th of January, 44. And from there, we did 25 separate missions. And then on the 25th, we were supposed to come home. And of course, we flew with our 25th mission in Levi's and street shoes and what have you, but this their other stuff over it. And we hit what they call a no-ball target, which is parallel to the beach. And I guess we were trying to make the enemy feel that that's where they were going to pull the invasion. And so we hit the beach between Calais and Dieppe. And came back, and we were 6 miles out in the English Channel, and something hit us. And they say it was a ground-to-air rocket, but I'd never seen any by then. And so I don't know whether it was or not. I think that whatever it was hit our wingman. We at that time were a lead crew. So we were the front man, and our right wingman came into us, crashed into us. He took our nose, 4 engines, and put us out of commission. And we lost 3 officers, the co-pilot, the navigator, and the bombardier, and 1 enlisted man, one of the waist gunners. How he got it, I don't know. But we tried to eject the co-pilot with us. Well, with the radio operator and myself. I don't know why, but I came out of the tail when all this happened, rather than go out the tail door. And I could see the co-pilot was in trouble. And the radio operator, one of the radio operators, was with me, and we went to try to help him. And one thing, they gave us chest packs. The pilot used a seat pack, and I think the navigator and the bombardier used a seat pack. But the co-pilot used a chest pack, and he kept it under his seat. And one thing they did with the chest pack, that the carry handle is the same end as the ripcord. And when he reached for the carry handle, he hit the ripcord, popped the chute under his seat. Front was like a wind tunnel, and then he tried to gather the chute in his hands, and he couldn't do it. And he kind of freaked out. We were trying to get him hooked up with the engineer, who they were both slight men. And you could hook the chest pack, one hook here and one hook on the other guy, and you could get down with the chute. But there were smaller chutes in the chest packs or the seat packs. And that didn't work out. So one of our waist gunners, when he hit the ground, he hit mines. And he was pretty well shot up. The Germans sent him home because he was so badly shot up. Germans were funny. You had well, the people that captured me when I hit the ground, I didn't hit the ground, I hit the top of a tree and got hung up in that tree. And I waited for a while, and I tried to get my knife out, cut myself loose. But then a man in perfect English down below, "Hold on, do you need any help?" And oh boy, I thought, well, there's a GI or most of them are crew members. But it was a German sergeant. And first thing he asked me for was a cigarette. I gave him a Lucky Strike cigarette. And he gave the package back to me. I thought it was very funny. But he was from Yonkers, New York. He went over there in 1939 to bury his grandmother. And he was conscripted into the service. And since he spoke English, of course, he was put on the coast. But they were expecting the invasion on the coast. They were expecting it around Calais, Dieppe, and the shortest part across the channel. I broke this knee. I still have a broke knee. The tibia plateau is gone. And they didn't know that till a year or two later. But anyway, I was limping, of course, and he gave me a crutch. The sergeant did, and we walked to a little farmhouse. When in the farmhouse, he sat me down in a straight chair, and I took the straight chair out a little bit and then lean it back on the wall where I could get this foot off the ground. So about that time, there was a screech out front, a lot of clicking of heels and yelling, and the door flew open. In walked Erich von Stroheim, bald, hat in his hand, pistol in the other hand, monocle, Erich von Stroheim, right from the movies. Screaming, 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 and shooting the pistol through the roof. And the sergeant stuck his head in the door and went this. In other words, stand up. So I stood up. When I stood up, everything was fine. And I thought, these people are crazy. But this guy was an old Prussian general. And he was more interested in the officers than he was the enlisted men. And there was only one officer, and that was the pilot. And but everything calmed down after that. And they brought an ambulance up, and they put us in the ambulance. And this is when we saw our waist gunner who was shot up so bad. And he was in great pain. But they took us to a hospital. They looked at me and they said, "You got a sprain." So I was put back in the ambulance, and along with my radio operator and my radio man. And the rest of the people they took into the hospital. And then they took us to Lille, France. And this is where a lot of things happened. They put me in the basement in a chicken wire cage, about 6 foot square, with a bunk about so high on it. And took all my clothes, and just naked, gave me a blanket. That was it. And then that night or that evening, as the officers came in, I know they were officers because the only people that wore shiny boots were officers. And they came in, and a guard came in the enclosure and grabbed me, threw me over this extra high bunk. And I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And these officers came in with quite an audience. And I was sodomized for a good couple of hours. Finally, I figured, well, I'm not dying this way or anything, so the fourth guy came in, chattered some stuff. Everybody laughed, and I turned quick on my left leg, my good right leg, and kneed him hard. Well, he screamed. Everybody yelled, and it's the last thing I remember because I had a rifle butt right in the side of my head. And I woke up naked on the floor, nobody there, and all kinds of excitement out. Well, this was the 5th of June. So on the morning of the 6th of June, they hit Cherbourg. So everybody was you know, just like somebody slapped an ant's nest. Everybody's going every which way. And I was throwing a pair of coveralls and taken down and put on a train, regular Pullman train. And we went through, I remember going through Tournai, Belgium. And that had been bombed that morning by, I think, either B-26s or B-25s. And on the train, there was a bombardier from one of the airplanes that was shot down that morning. And we went through Tournai, and he got to see the damage they'd done. And so he started yelling, and oh boy, we did it, and so forth and so on. And they didn't like that, so they stopped the train, pulled all the shades down, made sure he didn't yell anymore. And then we went, and about a couple hours later, we ended up in Belgium, Brussels, Belgium. And in Brussels, Belgium, we took us into the big train station and the big rotunda there. And it looked like it had been hit, the glass was everywhere and so forth. And about that time, there's a commotion, and a bunch of little old ladies came out with their umbrellas, striking us this way and screaming at us. And we couldn't figure out what. So one of the little old ladies slipped a note into one of the guy's hands. And in the note it said, "Follow the man with the red coat." And so we didn't know what the heck that meant. So anyway, on the back of this rotunda, a door opened. And here come this little old guy out with a red coat, a dustpan, and a whisk broom, and picking up cigarette butts and things like that. And he gave us a funny look and then disappeared. But he left the door open. And the German guards that were there were 3 or 4 of them, were busy taking care of the little old ladies. And so we went out the back door into a small pickup truck. And we were gone. And we ended up in the French underground. French underground, they didn't talk much, but they explained different things. But the French underground had these cells that went across France. Nobody from this cell knew who the other cell was, so the Germans couldn't trace it through. But they had picked off one unit there, and we were funneled right into that one unit, and we were captured again. But now we were spies, because we had on civilian clothes and so forth, and well, we'd probably be killed and all this nonsense, and they were for all always wanting to kill you, you know, for some reason. So we were worked back into Brussels, and then we were going ahead, and I think we ended up the next time in Frankfurt. Frankfurt, Germany is right on the border. And we were, there was another little town in there. I'll think of it sometime. But anyway, we were put in this one little town, and it was a Red Cross center. and we were given some clothes, more clothes, more GI clothes. I was given a British jacket and British pants and Polish boots. They were hobnail boots. And all through Frankfurt, when you walked anywhere between buildings or anything, it's all cobblestone. And with those hobnail boots, you just like skates. So we had a lot of fun falling down. We stayed in another little town right there by Frankfurt. It's all in a square. And we were interrogated. And the guy that interrogated us was supposed to be the best in the German army. We found that out later. He was very nice, spoke good English. He came on to us as a major, but he was only a corporal actually. But he asked us these different questions and so forth. But then we went to somebody else, and this was 3 or 4 guys. They told me where I lived in the States. They told me my grandmother's name, my father's name. They told me my cat's name, where I went to school, all this. And we couldn't figure out, well, how did they know all this particular stuff? So we found out later that this is where the 5th column came in. All your hometown newspapers went to Germany. They went to a submarine off Florida. And this was all cataloged. So if any time that they got my things, I shot down an airplane. So on the hometown paper, gunner shoots down airplane, so forth. And in there's where I lived, everybody that was associated with me, my cat's name and everything else. Well, it's all there in black and white. So this is how the Germans got an awful lot of their information was through the 5th column. But all of this was, they were great ones at filing things, and there's always something on somebody. The more they know about you, they can, nothing fancy or anything. They wanted to know how many missions I had, where I was based, what my bomb group was, and so forth and so on. Well, they would guess, but they wouldn't hit it. So this stuff we didn't tell them. They tried all kinds of tricks to try to get you to, like how many guns did you have on the airplane, or they could tell then if you were a turret gunner or tail gunner or what. Little things like that, they would try to trick you into this and that. The radio people, they picked out real quick. With all the fancy radio stuff. They took us to a train station, and they put us on what they call a 40 and 8 rail car. All of the trains over there are small gauge and they're small, and they have a box car they call a 40 and 8, or the American Legion call it. It holds 8 horses or 40 soldiers. Well, they put 81 of us in that thing, and we could just stand. And after so many hours in that thing, you just almost fall down. So we had to figure out a way that half could kneel or sit, and the other half stand, number-wise. But it was terrible. And then, of course, there's no toilet facilities of any kind. We finally got a bucket from them. And one thing we learned that you can live without food, but boy, you can't go without water. We went without water for 4 days, and everybody was talking to each other. And they finally gave us water after 4 days, but they put us on this train, and after going so long, I think we were in either Berlin or Stettin. And we finally got some water from them. It was 4 days later. And we're standing and everything. Your muscles are tight. You just can't go anywhere. Then they take you out of the train and double time you. And into this camp. We went into a brand new camp in, it's around Königsberg, Poland. It's up on the Baltic Sea. And they double timed us into this camp and pushed us in with bayonets and police dogs. You get police dog bites all over you, and I still have bayonet scars in my wrists from doing this. But put us in this camp, and it was supposed to be escape-proof. And there were 4 loggers in it, and only three of them were finished. And I think we were put in the second logger. The first logger they used as propaganda. They took pictures of everybody and so forth in that logger, but it was straight. Our logger that we were in, the barracks were all 3 foot off the ground. So at night, they closed the doors and turned dogs loose in the compound. And you didn't dare go down there with those dogs. In the daytime, there was a perimeter that went around. It was in square shape. And about 15 yards in from the fence, the main fence, which was electric, there was a small fence about like that. And if you got over that small fence, the guards would shoot you. So it was pretty escape-proof. Although they tried many times to get out of there, but I don't recall anybody ever escaping out of that. And of course, outside of the fence was quite an area maybe an acre you'd have to cross. And at night there were searchlights all around it. In the daytime, they had their chosen spies, I guess, wander through the barracks Well, every one of these guys we found out is pretty good at English. And we named a lot of them. Like one fellow always had a green uniform and everybody else was blue. So we called him the Green Hornet. And there was one gentleman there that scared me to death. He was about 8 feet tall, professional wrestler. Very gaunt, very gargantuan features. Like the Angel, remember the old, yeah, like the Angel. And his name was Herman Schmidt. He was a sergeant. And he found me outside as we came into the compound. And he put his hand on top of my head and just lift me off the ground. And then lick his lips. Well, I didn't know what the word. I'd gone through this bit before, and I'd do it again. But he would always look for me and always pick me up by the head. And he really scared me. And whenever I went out, I'd make sure where he was or that he wasn't nearby. But he scared everybody like that. He was quite sadistic, you might say, in the way he did things. And he went on, when we were repatriated, and he went on a march across Germany to Bremen with half of the camp, and the other half, the walking wounded, went south from there to a place called Moosburg. And I understand that around Bremen, he got as far as one of the barracks there. Somebody got him with a knife, beheaded him. He was hated by everybody. There were a number of men that would come in barracks in uniform. Well, they used to use the old, what was it, the rogues call, circus call. Hey, Rube, meant there was trouble. And somebody would answer him, yeah, he landed down there. So you know that there was somebody in the barracks that could hear things. So whatever you were doing, you stopped doing it. And then they got a guy from in there from, was a fuller brush man in Jersey. He knew what A Rube was. So he told them, and so we had to stop that. We would try to, on bad weather, we would try to keep the guards outdoors as long as possible. So they used to count you. You'd all line up in front of the barracks, and then the guard would go along, one on the front, one on the back, counting the rows. So many guys in a row. So the little guy would step over on top of the big guy's shoes so they couldn't see him. So you would always get a bad count from the front to the back. Then they'd have to count again. And we'd keep them out in the snow or in the wet weather as much as possible. We would do a lot of trickery that way, and the counting, and finally they get all teed off, and they moved us. They moved the one people one half across Germany to Bremen, and then the others, they moved straight down from into Nuremberg, and then straight down to Munich. And on the way down to Munich, it was 50 below Fahrenheit. And a lot of guys are frozen hands, frozen feet. And you couldn't get warm. One thing Hitler did, though, that was to our advantage, was every farm, every big farm, had 2 barns. One barn was just livestock, and the other barn was, no, one barn was livestock, chickens, all that kind of stuff. And then the second barn was just hay. So if Hitler ever had to move his troops, they had some place inside that they could sleep in. And sleeping on the hay mound is good, is nice. So they would put us in there at night, and of course at that time there's always chickens around. They found eggs, of course, and things this way. Things got a little better when we were on the move. But we got down to about the Rhine River. And we were all marching on this small road. It looked like probably 1,000 or better bunches of GIs, and we got attacked by our own troops. Air Force came down at about about the Rhine River, and where they bombed and strafed us, killed a lot of GIs and maimed some. But when we would hear those bombers coming down, they were mostly P-47s, we'd break off into the woods. There's nice woods there. So we break off at a dead run and get out of the way of all this strafing and so forth. Well, we did it one day, and we ended up with 6 of us and 1 German guard. And we were back in the woods, okay? So the evening came along, and okay, we got to get out of these woods. Well, here's where your Boy Scout tricks come in, you know. Well, they tell you that moss always grows on the north side of a tree. Don't you believe it? It grows on any side. And so we got lost. And we came across, thought we were going west, and we headed east. And we ended up at the Autobahn between Nuremberg and Munich. Well, we decided, we got to cross that Autobahn, so we're got to go underneath it, which was bad thinking. Because the Germans wanted to go underneath it too. They didn't want to sit up there and be noticed, you know. So we ran right into a patrol underneath that Autobahn. They picked us up, put us in a lorry on at night on the Autobahn, and took us south to their camp. Now there's a place called Dachau, which is SS camp, a factory, and Jewish barracks. They used the Jews in the barracks in the factory for the SS. It was all one big compound down there. So the train went down in there and curled up and always in the SS area, never on the other side. So we came down and went along that train track. And when we went along that train track, there was a freight train in there, and we counted 39 cars there. I was told by people at Dachau there were 40 cars there full of dead bodies. They were from the main camp, where they would bring the families in, and they would split the families up there. The women would be killed, women and children, and the men would be taken for hostage and for working different places in Germany. But they would take them on a boxcar. Buchenwald was one. They're going through into that camp. And on the other end of that camp were the ovens. The ovens right now, as you go through them, they have 2 of those ovens to view as you go by, but they were never used. The ovens that were used were on a ridge behind those ovens. And what had ever happened to that ridge, I don't know, but there's no ridge there now. It's all flat land. So somebody, either Allies or Germans, cut that ridge down. But there was about 10 ovens or more on top of that. Well, we were put in those ovens. We were thrown in a big warehouse, more or less. There were picks and shovels and everything in the world in there. We could have broken out and everything from that. But why they put us in there, I don't know. But we saw very few guards, German guards. Well, that was because the Rhine down here, this is where Patton was coming across. Put in there and put to work on these ovens on this ridge. And we would clean the ovens in the mornings and fill them in the morning and so forth. But about the 3rd day, there was no wood, there was no coal, there was no oil. We couldn't do anything, so those bodies just laid out there along those tracks. They would kick them out of the box cars and they would just lay there. But one good thing is it's very cold at night, so they didn't have any chance to decay, or there's no smell or anything like that. So we worked that about a week, I think, and then one day the guard that came in there with us showed up, and he told us, "Come on, let's get out of here." And we said, "Very well, let's." And so he had an old jitney he got, I think it ran on charcoal. So we headed towards the town of Dachau. And right on the other side of Dachau, the town of Dachau, was the town of Moosburg. And that's where the rest of the guys were brought into. And they were brought into this big area down there. And there was 116,000 prisoners of war, all nationalities, in big circus tents and things like that in that area. Meantime, General Patton had been notified of what was going on there, and he sent his 14th Armored, 99th Infantry, 25th Infantry straight across from the Rhine, and these guys got in there. Well, meanwhile, I'm getting far ahead of myself. Hitler had declared all of the POWs done away with. And he sent his crack black shirts from Berlin straight down to through Nuremberg, straight down to annihilate all of us in this one plane. I forget what they called it. And they had already started down. So when Patton's 14th Armored came straight through to meet them, and they met them about half an hour before they got to us. And there was one hellish battle there in that plane. And they carried it right down through Munich. And Munich, there was a big battle down there too, the latter part of the war. And the Germans finally surrendered down there. I have a piece of the surrender flag that was given to me by one of the tank commanders, and we're in there. Out. Well, we weren't out yet because we were bused to a airfield, and we had to wait for these C-47s and C-46s to come in and pick 8 or 9 of us up and fly us out. But then they flew us out to a big airfield there. I don't know where it was, Abbeville or where. And then they put us on a train, and it's the Orient Express. And they took us into Le Havre, France. And we had all these souvenirs or blankets and all this stuff that we had carried with us. And we had to get all those fumigated, and everything we had fumigated. I lost a lot of things that I wanted to bring home. But then they fumigated us all at Le Havre, and then segregated us out and put us on boats in Le Havre. And I was put on a Liberty ship, hospital ship. It was British. And it took us 9 days to cross. We had some bad weather. And we ate mutton and pork chops, not pork chops, but lamb chops, and oh God, I haven't had one since. But we went across the Atlantic. We were supposed to come in New York City, berth in New York City, but there was no berth at New York City, so they sent us up to Boston. And we went to Boston and went into Boston Harbor and were taken off the boat, a GI truck, into the mess hall. We got to the mess hall, huge, big, beautiful mess hall. We expected to find food, coffee, things this way. But there's one guy in there mopping the floor. We're going to figure out what the heck is going on. So we asked him. He was an Italian prisoner of war. And he was afraid of us at first. We told him who we were and so forth. And where is everybody? He says, well, he didn't know they probably were on pass. We said, all the KP personnel on pass, yeah. But all the KP personnel were German prisoners of war. You mean the German prisoners of war are on pass? Yes, they were all on a 3-day pass in Boston. This is funny, you know. Things like that, they rang a bell, but anything. But these guys, they were in charge of the PX, charge of the mess halls and things like this. They were all German and Italian prisoners of war, American prisoners of war. And they were all paid and they were all on pass. Well, that went over like a lead balloon. So I remember kicking out the windows of the mess hall. But we were out, and then MPs showed up. And then we were put on a train, a Pullman train, in Boston Yards there. And still hadn't eaten anything. And we took off. All these MPs came with us. We picked up some dining cars in the middle of New Jersey somewhere, and we ate, and these MPs stayed with us all the time across the United States to Camp Beale. They wouldn't let us off the train, anything else, so of course we'd sucker them off the train. A bunch of guys would run, we'd stop at a train station, and the guys would run in the train station, you know, and they'd bust all the vending machines and bring the candy and stuff back. And this went on all across the United States. Why? I didn't tell you what the idea. And then we got to Camp Beale. We got to Camp Beale, and evidently, see, nobody had any rank, anything. We had colonels with us. We had all kinds of people. And we got to Camp Beale, and evidently the guys thought we were recruits or something. And some corporal come out and called everybody to attention and so forth. Now here y'all, and says the first thing y'all gonna do is police the area. Well, the last I saw that guy, his feet were sticking out of a trash can. And then the whistles came again, and we were put in some barracks, and the very next day, there's as much guys they had orders for Southern California. They pulled out and put out in a rail car, sent them to Sacramento, I think, and we had tickets to go home. Well, we bought uniforms on the way home. We stopped in Fresno and bought uniforms, and then went down here to L.A., South L.A., and one of the fellows that's with me was his uncle was a MD in Long Beach, and he called his uncle from a payphone. We were given about $20, I guess. We had hundreds coming to us, but we got about $20, so we were able to buy a shirt for $5 and pants for $8, something like that. But we we got a uniform. I need to get a uniform, some rank and stuff on it. And we got into the red cars, on the red cars, and got into L.A. And this gentleman's uncle was waiting for us. He had a gas card, being an MD and so forth, and a new Buick, and so he came after us, took us to his office, and really gave us a going over. The first time I'd seen the doctor since I left Germany. You know, it's crazy the way the Army treated us at that point. And we were treated like slaves, more or less. Then I was supposed to go back to a hotel in Santa Monica a month later. And we went back to the hotel, and it was a hotel. There wasn't a hospital, anything. We didn't see a doctor. We saw like a corpsman take our temperature and so forth. But we saw no medical treatment at all. Yeah, well, we were supposed to go to Santa Ana at the old dirigible base out there. And they sent most everybody to Santa Ana. But I didn't want to go to Santa Ana. I wanted to go to the air base in Long Beach. And there was a major behind me that wanted to go to Long Beach also. And so he held more rank than I did, and he put up such a fuss that they sent both of us to Long Beach. Well, they put me in charge of the motor pool in Long Beach, and he went somewhere. I never saw him again, so I don't know where. He went on the flight line or something. I went back in Long Beach in June, I think, 45, June of 45, and I was discharged in October. So I was in Long Beach for about 6 months. And while I was in Long Beach, I met Patton, McGregor, the gentleman who went to Tokyo. Anything positive? Oh yeah, it was very positive, especially with our air group. We were the 13th aircraft, American aircraft, over Berlin. The first American aircraft over Berlin to bomb Berlin. And like I say, we had 25 missions to Berlin, 8 of them to Berlin. It's kind of hard to say, you know, whether you actually did anything or that way, but you kind of went along with the crowd, really.